Hey there guys, it's time for another Internet Kids guide for soloing Inferno Diablo with a wizard class in Diablo III. It took me quite a few tries before I finally got him down, but I did it, and I'm going to share my strategy and spec for this fight. I used the melee tank build that I talked about in a previous video, but I changed up a few things in the spec department. For offensive abilities, I used Spectral Blade with the Deep Cuts rune, Energy Twister with a Wicked Wind rune, and Explosive Blast with the Chain Reaction, all of which are great for critical hits and life on hit. For defensive, I used Diamond Skin with the Crystal Shell to absorb more damage, Energy Armor with Prismatic rune for the extra resistances, and Frost Nova with the Bone Chill rune. If you haven't watched my other video on this build, I used to use the Cold Snap rune for Frost Nova, which lowers the cooldown time, but I had less crit hit chance then. I was up to 39.5% by the time I started Act 4, so cooldowns were not a problem since critical mass would proc almost non-stop. So I switched to Bone Chill rune for the extra damage. For passive skills, I used Blur, Critical Mass, and Arcane Dynamo. I had used one of the mana regen abilities previously, but with the additional crit hit chance and arcane power on crit, it was no longer necessary, so I opted for a damage increase. Before I get into the actual strategy that I used, I'm going to give you some general tips for the Diablo fight. First, go for damage reduction type stats for this fight. I haven't actually looked this up and I don't really know if I'm right, but it didn't seem like Diablo has any sort of enrage timer. The fight took me about 15 minutes, and I will show you all of my gear and stats in a few minutes. Secondly, you keep any stat bonus you get from your followers, even after they are incapacitated at the beginning of the fight, but if you die, you will lose those buffs. So make sure you go back to town and rehire your follower before trying again. Lastly, and this is a wizard specific tip, Frost Nova will interrupt all of Diablo's abilities. I'll talk more about which you should try to interrupt in a minute. Okay, now for the strategy for this fight. The fight itself is pretty simple and not that difficult. The thing that was causing problems for me was the shadows in Phase 2. Apparently, a shadow copy of me is stronger than Diablo. I tried many different strategies to handle the shadows, but with this build it just wasn't happening. Until I found out that you can kite the shadows, and they will eventually despawn, making this phase a whole lot easier. An important thing for this fight is timing. Interrupting abilities with Frost Nova and having Diamond Skin up at the right moment will save you some repair gold. What I did was always try to interrupt the Bone Cage spell. It's really annoying if you don't, and you will have to move around a lot to avoid it. If you miss the interrupt and are going to be trapped in a cage, try to get Diamond Skin up so it negates the damage when he picks you up. Now if you miss the interrupt and just have bad timing and get picked up without Diamond Skin, immediately use Diamond Skin or Frost Nova when you hit the ground. Other than that, just try to avoid shit on the ground if possible, and the fight shouldn't be too difficult. I had some comments in my previous videos. People wanted to see my stats and gear, and I figured this video would be the perfect place to show them. When I was comparing gear to upgrade, I would make sure there was always an increase to resist all and armor, and at least the same amount of intelligence. Obviously preferring all three to be an increase. You should try to get as much intelligence, critical hit chance, life on hit, and arcane power on crit as you can, while not sacrificing resist all and armor. As you can see, I don't have a lot of damage. You want to focus on damage reduction over DPS. This goes for elite pack farming too. Occasionally there are fights where you will need higher DPS. I know for the Bilal fight I hit the enrage timer just because I didn't have the damage output. In situations like that, you can just tweak your spec a little and you should be fine. As for stats for the Diablo fight, I really didn't do much testing with higher or lower stats. What you see is what I had. I did attempt to tweak the spec a few times, but ended up back on the one I showed at the start to finally defeat him. Well, that was it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and favorite this video. If you want to watch the full-length fight without the commentary, you can just click on the screen below the subscribe button. You can also check us out at internetkidsgaming.net.